Hello and welcome to the Personal Podcast, the podcast where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Ammar Mirza, CBE Community and Business Champion. So, Ammar, have you ever experienced racism?
Gosh, yes, I have. Absolutely.
What is perhaps one of your earliest memories of it?
So we grew up in the west end of Newcastle, and it was predominantly white area. I remember we lived in Beaconfield Street, and at that time, it probably was some of the earlier memories of my parents having a gazillion bolts on the front door.
Wow.
There was literally a metal bar that went across the front door, and there was bolts from top to the bottom. And I really didn't understand that. But I then experienced individuals on a Friday or Saturday night, drunken individuals standing outside the door, shouting abuse and things like that. So this was, I'm talking about sort of under 5-year-old and our family experience in this. So that was quite threatening.
Oh, I bet.
And from a memory perspective, it wasn't all of the time. It was more of a rarity, but it still happened. And then, people would pack and go home and whatever else, and those type of comments and that type of experience was quite shocking.
I bet. And just immersed in that from such a young age. Was that almost your normal?
No, I don't think so. Or at least from a memory perspective, I'd hate to think that was the case. But it certainly existed, and you always remember the more painful experiences. And then there was a couple of individuals who lived on the estate opposite us on Stanhope Street, and they had an Alsatian, and they'd regularly set that dog onto us. I remember coming through Leazes Park a couple of times with my elder brother, and us having to climb up trees and things like that. So they're the earlier experiences of, it's a bit more hurtful than simply someone saying something to you.
Setting a dog on you as
It was the thing. Yeah, it was an Alsatian. I remember Shane, and I'm sure the kind, wonderful people wherever they are now, but certainly at that time, it was typical or stereotypical of that individual. So these were skinheads.
right.
It was almost, and it's wrong because I hate that sort of stereotypical thought of anybody just because they look like that doesn't mean that you should immediately think they will act like that. But that was very much the case.
Oh, it's shocking. And so was there a real threat of someone trying to break into your house to harm you?
As to whether it was a threat or drunkenness or foolishness or bravado or whatever it was, I don't think so. But if I reflect back on the amount of knock, genuinely it was like 4 knocks, and that continued throughout our lives, even though that threat, I believe, didn't continue. My late mother definitely had additional locks and would always have additional locks and put chains and everything else on the door, and it became a bit more inherent, habitual is what it was.
Yeah. When did you realise that wasn't normal?
Maybe as I got older. I mean, we've always experienced, and I use the term we, I have always experienced racism. More recently, biases.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So it still happens today?
That still happens today. Not as prevalent as that.
Yeah.
But biases exist.
What sort of biases?
So I'm incredibly fortunate in that I found myself sort of being appointed a CBE, being an honorary colonel, things that I'm immensely proud of, and saddened by the fact that my late parents didn't experience quite a lot of that, because I definitely feel as if a number of those accolades and recognitions came about from in memory of my late mother. She was an amazing person. But coming back to the experiences, so more recently, people that I'm familiar with, who know me. I was at an event last year, and it was filled with dignitaries, and I remember having a conversation with a dignitary that I've known for some time, and they'd mistaken me for the Lord Mayor, because the Lord Mayor, for the first time in Newcastle's history, was an Asian.
Right.
Those type of things. So I wouldn't say that's conscious racism, but the biases exist. And even working with colleagues on certain projects as a consultant, as soon as there's two Asian individuals, they'll regularly call me their name.
Right.
Now, that's not racism, but it's those unconscious biases that exist, that you can't. There can't be two Asian people in that role or that position. So I'm going to mistakenly go, oh well, how did you get here today? Do I feel imposter syndrome? Don't think so. I mean, I've worked hard for where I've got to. Should I be where I am? I sometimes think I shouldn't.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't mean that through effort. I'm talking about background, coming from a broken family, coming from a deprived, suffering abject poverty. So traditionally, the routes that are written for people in those environments isn't the route that I've had or taken, but I've fought against that, right? It's been a conscious effort to get to where I've got to, and I've demonstrated it time and time again. So whilst I don't suffer from imposter syndrome, I reflect on how fortunate I am. I'm incredibly grateful, filled with gratitude of the opportunities that I've had. But I do then, think about how does that relate to and influence others, and how does that impact me and my life. So I find myself in positions where people question, well, how could you be there? Why should you be there? As in, because it's unusual.
Yeah.
And I love getting out of the comfort zone. I love proving to both myself, because I'm incredibly competitive, but to others, not necessarily wrong. Just change their views is what I'd like to do.
Absolutely. I just wrote that question down. Like, do you always have to feel you need to prove yourself? Which,
yeah, somewhat.
yeah,
because just that's the way things are. It's quite unusual. I love the fact that I was a first. I've always been competitive with myself primarily, but also then with others. But I love the first part. Do I love failing? Absolutely not. I hate even the idea of failing, and this thought and this concept of we should fail, and that should be the goal. I think is the wrong goal. I think we should definitely learn. I definitely think we should have experiences, and we should share those experiences. But as to whether we should encourage people for their goal to be failure is absolutely wrong. That's certainly my view.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think people should never not do something or not try because they're afraid of failure. When a failure happens, embrace it, learn from it, as you're saying. But yeah, you shouldn't just think, oh, let's just try and fail.
Yeah.
That's not the goal.
Yeah.
But going back to that unconscious bias that you mentioned, how do we stop that?
Education. And I don't mean formal training, tick box type of imposed activities that tend to happen in the schools, right? It's like, right, everyone needs to be unconsciously biased, sort of trained and everyone needs to go through this process. Actually, it's about having conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what education is to me.
And speaking openly about it.
Is what does that mean? And then how might we overcome this? I love asking the question, how might we? Right? As opposed to what will you do? Or what?
Yeah.
You know, it's the and that's what gets people thinking a bit more creatively and authentically. I want to have open conversations. I want to feel comfortable with, okay, why did someone that I worked incredibly closely with on a particular project mistake my name for that other person?
Yeah.
Right? Because the most sensitive thing and the most personal thing to anyone is their name.
Yeah, true.
Right? So getting that wrong consistently is hurtful.
It shows lack of care for me.
And whether that was, I genuinely, because the examples that I'm sharing with you, these are really good, nice people. There's no question whether there was any malice or there was any hurtful intent. And this is where the unconscious element comes from. So it comes back down to, are they careless? Is it a case of how do you unwind and unlearn some of those things? Growing up, I'm embarrassed by it and I'm incredibly apologetic about it. But growing up, there was a Chinkies at the top of the street. Mum would go, right, we're going to the Chinkies. And that might sound ironic and incredibly hypocritical given the conversations that we've just had around race and things like that. At that time, I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't call or say that out of malice or hate.
No.
And I'm giving you this example here in that it's really, really interesting, right? That we adopt things and adapt things to the environment and the people that influence it. Now, I'd be horrified. I'm incredibly embarrassed at that thought, is what I am. And I imagine, a lot of conversations with my so-called friend, and I genuinely believed they were friends at that time when I was growing up. They'd stand outside the corner shop and abuse the corner shopkeeper and then turn to me, calling him a packy and whatever else, and then turn to me, going, not you, all you're one of us. I don't think they were necessarily aware to the extent that we'd want to categorize them. But there was definitely malice there because they were abusing someone. Is what there was. So there's a range of experiences. There's a range of examples. Do I have an answer as to how we overcome these unconscious biases? A lot of it's habit, right? So like we talk about training and learning and education, probably an element of unlearning.
Which doesn't happen overnight.
It certainly doesn't.
Yeah.
And it takes a bit more. So what can you do? You can make a bit more of an effort. That's what you can do. You can mindfully start thinking about, okay, well, I know this person, he's called Ammar, and there might be an Abdul. I'm now going to make an effort to call them by their right names.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if I need to address that unconscious bias, because that's what it is, it's unconscious, is what it is, then what type of tools and techniques can I adapt and adopt? Whether it's, I make a mental picture, Ammar's got hair, Abdul hasn't, I don't know, Ammar's got really funny hair, whatever that is. But you can do certain things if you then need to consciously address that.
Yes. I have to do it with everyone. If I'm in a board meeting or even sometimes at a networking event where there's no badges, I have to make notes almost around the table because I'm bad with everyone's name. So But yeah, so do you think nowadays, I'd like to hope this is true, that it's not so much racism, it is more the unconscious bias, or almost that we've progressed, or do you still feel racism is alive?
Oh, racism is incredibly alive. I'm saddened to say we're going backwards.
Oh, really? Getting worse?
Yeah, we're going backwards. And I'm not talking about me and my experiences. I'm sort of incredibly fortunate, and that's why sometimes these examples that I'm sharing with you almost are trivial to other people's experiences, where there's genuine hurtful abuse that exists because of people practicing a particular belief for a religion and things like that. So you can look at the statistics. Anti-Semitism, there's Islamophobia, there's all of these challenges that are impacting these communities, and it's hurtful to see, and then it's reinforced. And I've been having conversations of the late with a number of significant individuals, some that I hold in incredibly high esteem, and you can see that their views becoming a bit more bigoted to them, really starting to go, well, Ammar, there's gonna come a time when we're gonna have to stand up against your kind. And I'm like, really? And now that's a very crude example, but these are conversations taking place. And that's because of the religious beliefs. So, the feeling that radical Islam's on its way to take over everyone, and that message is being reinforced through social media. It's being reinforced through the news. Sadly, lots of leaders, political leaders, tend to reinforce that as well. And it's a real shame.
Yeah. Do you think religion is at the heart of a lot of it?
Sadly, it always has been and continues to be. As to whether it's genuinely at the heart, and it's a minority that are agitating and aggravating and utilising it as an excuse, I believe that. But historically, religion has been one of the biggest catalysts to bring people together and equally cause division.
Yeah. And just on the subject of racism, I got a shock the other day because my dad does private medical insurance, and he went to a business in Sunderland, and he gave him a leaflet, a brochure to look through. And then he did a follow-up call, I don't know, call it 3 days later. And the guy from the business was just like, the brochure, it has loads of black people in it and Asian people in it. So why would I want private medical insurance from you? And my dad just didn't know what to say. He thought he just didn't get it. He thought something must have been confused. And he's just, and we're just so shocked that someone would make a business decision based on that. It's horrendous.
Undoubtedly. The reason why I'm probably not as shocked, Charlotte, is very much, I see that.
Really, you see that quite often as well.
I see that. And sadly, certain localities, it's reinforced. So Sunderland is and has sadly been one of the most prevalent racist places and spaces. And that's then reinforced by the negative messages, picking up and picking out certain examples of where communities and certain members, the minority members of certain communities have done something, and then it's blown out of proportion, and then it's used as a catalyst to agitate and aggravate that division. But yeah, I mean, we do a lot of service design thinking. We do a lot around innovation and inclusion. And believe it or not, I will say wrongly, but I will say, can we just double check who your audience is, because you need to consider what they might interpret or not. Right. So having a leaflet filled with, and I suppose this is marketing, and you're the expert around this particular topic, but knowing your audience, right? Now we can take that twofold that individual in Sunderland saying, why would I buy a product or service when it features so many ethnicities and colour? The flip side of that would be having a whole white brochure and going into a community which is more diverse, more ethnic as well. So that's knowing your audience almost.
It's a shame, isn't it?
It's shocking. Oh, I don't agree with that.
Oh, of course, yeah. And equally, we're not saying everyone in Sunderland is racist either,
Absolutely not. Some of the organisations we are incredibly fortunate to work with, some of the most diverse are actually based in Sunderland. Some of the biggest and the best activities happening around inclusion are happening in Sunderland. I was, I keep using this term, fortunate. I was involved with the Business Improvement District in Sunderland, and what I loved about it and hated about Newcastle at that time was the collaboration, the ambition of all of the stakeholders from the private, public and third sectors coming together with this ambition of transforming the place and the space. And that this was for the 15 years ago. And I've always seen that in Sunderland.
Yeah, we're starting to see the effects of that now, I think. How things always take so much time, but it seems to be really on the up.
Undoubtedly, from an economic point of view and from an investment, out of all of the spaces and places as a city, it's probably had the most investment across North East and Thames Valley. The challenge is people and bringing those people on that journey. Mindset, belief, behaviours, culture, right? So you can regenerate an area and drop in the shiniest and best, buildings and introduce, sort of so many of the world class, whatever it is. If that the person on the other side of the street or the person walking past that has no affinity with that place or space, then that regeneration's never going to work. And an observation from me would be, is that what's going on? How does that person in Hendon or that Pick Village who travels in and out on Park Lane in Sunderland on the bus, seeing all of this regeneration, but goes, this isn't for me? Yeah. And we're talking outwardly, which is right. We need to be positioning Sunderland and the whole of the North East on an international stage, but you need to connect with the local people.
Absolutely. No, I really agree with that. And there's that big battle almost, like build it and they will come or they will change. Yeah. Or, do you work with the people first that then help build it and then feel empowered towards making it?
I think it's an and, it's not an or. So you need to do both. I think what Sunderland has done and doing is fantastic. I'm incredibly proud of what Sunderland is achieving and has achieved on a world stage. I think what's imperative is that stakeholder engagement, but meaningful stakeholder engagement. And that may be a generation thing. That might be talking to children and young people, engaging them first and foremost, and explaining the value and the benefits of the work that's going on and how it can influence them, helping them realise and raise their ambitions and aspirations, because that's where things change. At this moment in time, the vast majority of influences are older generations, both people who can still remember the shipbuilding and the coal mining and are hung up on the lack of jobs and the lack of opportunities. So that reinforces, well, those jobs aren't for you. You shouldn't be going to university. You shouldn't be in all of that narrative that's reinforced. So you need children and young people to become advocates and ambassadors. They need to go, the digital cities, the best digital place, the venues that they're creating, the Vaux site, that used to be a brewery that my granddad used to go talk about. Well, you want to see what's going on there, that type of conversation. and our school went there, and I can be an astronaut, or I can be involved in automation and automotive. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, what's so telling, I don't know if you recall, Charlotte, is when Brexit happened. It happened in Sunderland. So the first place on the television when they announced the vote was Sunderland. And everybody was white. Everybody was doing this. Everyone was raving about, Brexit happened, and all of the councillors and everyone else. And everyone felt like, we've got our country back and all of this. 90% of the jobs that people had in advanced manufacturing and a number of the venues, 90% of those jobs were European or internationally owned jobs. So the best jobs in Sunderland were by organisations owned outside of the UK. What an own goal, then where did that narrative come from? And all of a sudden, organisations like this are sat there saying, I don't think we can invest further in the UK because of the challenges. And actually, the UK government has had to provide so many subsidies, provide so much support to counter that, right? Now, I think it's absolutely fantastic to see Nissan investing in the North East and continuing to realise it's the best place for their production and their electric future plants and all of that. But it took a lot of hard work and unnecessary hard work on that basis.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm sure we could talk all day on.
Without a doubt.
No, and you talked about generations and how we change cultures and beliefs. What values and beliefs did your parents instill in you growing up?
Yeah, good question. Hard work.
Yeah,
was always at the forefront. There's no such thing as an easy ride. So work ethic. I've always had 2 or 3 jobs. Right. Always. And whether that was whilst I was studying, I remember studying and had a job in a factory where they made jeans, and I don't know, I might be slightly older than you, Charlotte, but at one point there were jeans that had Bros and Flintstones on the front of them. There was there was this fad where these jeans had prints on the front of them, and I worked in this factory getting paid £1 an hour whilst I was still studying, and anyway, those type of things. So hard work, family is important, and even though I'm very open to admit we've always had a bit of a fractured family, and that was interesting. But Mum's work ethic, Mum provided us with everything that she could within her gift, and I've always not compared. So whilst I've seen others with, and as growing up, you always compare, right? Because we had absolutely nothing, and we didn't even have enough food on the table, and genuinely we didn't. And everything we had to put 50 pence in the back of, radio rentals, television, 50 pence in the back of, the gas meter, 50 pence in the back. It ran out because we didn't have any money. It ran out. There wasn't anything that you could do. So going to other people's houses and seeing that they had, these Tomy things and games and everything else, and I didn't have any of that. It was quite painful, but it was an incredible driver as well.
I bet. Yeah. Do you think you would have been as successful as you are today if you'd had a more comfortable upbringing?
So I sometimes reflect on this because we were the most affluent Asian family at that time. Mum, dad, and stepmom. Certainly, mum and dad had built up. They'd done all the markets. Dad was a teacher, which was quite unusual. He was the first sort of Asian teacher at that time. And lectured at Newcastle University, so incredibly educated, which was unusual. And mum was educated as well, but decided to work and bring the kids up. So she done the markets, bought lots of shops. We had loads of shops. We had loads of property. So when you think, in answer to your question, when I sit back and think what we could have had we continued from an entrepreneurial perspective, and I reflect on the opportunities, more opportunities that I could have had to make a bigger and better difference had we all continued to work together and had that sort of parental influences and things like that. I feel as if we could have done a lot better. Success is I don't measure success by how much money or things like that, although I'm very open at the fact that money gives you options.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who sits and says it's not about the money is rich and doesn't have to worry about the money. When you don't have any food, or if you don't have enough electricity, or you don't know whether you should feed the kids or pay the bills, or it's about the money. So I've never ever dismissed the importance of money, and I encourage everybody to consider a key metric in life is money, because it allows you to give, and have options. So I've my goals have at the times had a monetary value attached to them, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to give away sort of 30-40% of my income, not wealth, income over the last couple of decades. So yeah, and I might get divorced if the wife ever found.
Well, hopefully she won't watch the podcast.
Is the thing, but no, honestly, for me, if I can help someone, if I can see someone succeed or overcome a challenge or a pain, I get immense joy from that.
Mm-hmm.
As in, that's what life is all about.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be one of the great things about making a lot of money, that you can give to people and bring joy to other people. And obviously it's not just about money, it's giving time as well sometimes, but yeah.
Well, my lifelong ambition is to not have to worry about the bills, and believe it or not, I still do. And then be able to just give away all of my time. Oh, that'd be lovely. That's my lifelong ambition, and hopefully I can get to that stage. But going back to your point around it would be great to have enough money to be able to give stuff away. I've never ever sat and thought, I can't afford to give this away. Mm-hmm. I'm just giving it away.
It's true, because if you always give a certain percentage of what you've got, that could be a lot less than someone with loads of money, but you're still giving that percentage.
Well, that was it, right? And it goes back to whether I could afford to or not. I've always had this inherent belief, and that's where the 2-3 jobs and the values instilled in me is hard work. I mean, God forbid I walk out this door and get run over, but I've always felt if I need to make more money, I can just work for it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, whereas you've got a limited amount of time, whereas you can always earn more money. That's how I look at things.
So it comes and it goes, but the most precious thing is, as you say, Charlotte, is time. It's the one thing you can never ever recover.
It is, but sometimes I struggle with the dilemma that I have to sacrifice my time to make the money. In a service-based business, it'd be great, and I'm sure you've got businesses like this where you literally can make money while you sleep. But in my industry, sometimes I do have to put in more time to kind of get to that stage. It's all quite chicken and egg sometimes.
It is, very much so. And actually, I need more of those businesses where I can make money in my sleep, and that's where I think I'm starting to focus a lot more of my attention on.
So let me know what they are and then get involved. Do you have an idea for a podcast in your head? If so, we can record, produce, and promote that podcast to bring it to life. Contact us today to find out how. You mentioned a broken family, and I remember you telling me that your father had more than one wife. How did you feel about that growing up? And I presume it was accepted, in his culture, that was normal. Yes.
Oh, it was incredibly normal. Were the relationships between all of the individuals the best, or that they could be? Absolutely not. going back to those earlier memories and living at Beaconsfield Street, and mum lived upstairs, stepmum lived round the corner, and 3 stepsisters lived there. We lived in this house, and it was, whilst we were fed and we had mum like done the markets and had the shop, things like that. It was hard. It was really challenging, and that's because culturally and religiously, the way that we live followed that patriarchy, followed that the man was in charge, and what the man said and done, and some of my earliest memories were sadly Dad not being nice to Mum, and then me hiding his pouch at the back of the stairs because he smoked, whilst they were arguing and getting into fights and things like that. So it wasn't an incredibly nice place or space, but there was lots of us, and the family experiences of being together, and some of the midnight feasts when he'd get up and my elder sister would make toast and things like that. Anyway, there was upon reflection, it wasn't great, but it was just
yeah. And what do you think about it today? Would you like more than one wife?
Would I like more than well, ask my wife. It's funny because we talk about this occasionally in jest, obviously. But it was interesting because just thinking about Dad, and I admire and love them all. Now having matured and things like that. Might have had slightly challenging relationships with them earlier on, where Dad be actors and things. But coming back to your question, would I like more than one wife? I'm very happily married in what I am. I'm incredibly happily married, and it's interesting because culturally and religiously, having more than one wife, I can see the value and the benefits of that. Yeah, no, I'm not against it. Right. I'm clearly not against that happening.
What were the benefits?
Well, one. So that was interesting, and I'm using a real life example. So technically, Dad would be with my stepmom for these days, set days, and he'd be with Mum. And I think Mum, being the younger, the second wife, understandably didn't want to accept that split and whatever else. So there was those challenges and arguments and everything else. But yeah, so coming back to what would be the benefits? Well, from a female perspective, and don't forget, it's about relationships and how you manage these relationships, and there naturally has to be some level of acceptance. But one of the things, and I'm parking that response before I find myself in a hole somewhere. but one of the things to acknowledge, and I heard this the other day, right, on the news, and I thought, what a fantastic response. Whether I agreed with the news topic and interestingly, it was about Russia, right? And it was a reporter in Russia talking about elections, talking about, oh my gosh, and whatever else. And the response from the Russian individual to the reporter was, why do you think your way of life is the best way? Who gives you the right to suggest how we live or operate or democracy exists and whatever it is wrong?
Yeah, I quite often say that. Again, it comes down to potentially those unconscious biases.
Right. So we in the West, and I'm guilty of this, incredibly guilty, we believe, all of this should be the way that it is. We're modern, we're mature, we have this, that. If I look around, society's starting to break down a little bit. People are lost. There's lack of sense of purpose and all of that. So And we almost feel as if we're going backwards when you're asking about racism. It definitely feels like that, but I don't think it's just racism. I think it's prejudices, it's biases, it's all of that. So coming back to who am I to judge somebody who actually happily has 2 wives and those wives are happy with that arrangement? Why are my views where I'm incredibly happy with my relationship with my wife, with my family. I feel genuinely blessed is what I do. And speaking incredibly openly, I don't feel the need to want to look anywhere else. We'll joke about Angelina Jolie and things like that. Maybe if she came around and knocked on the door, maybe a different conversation. But joking aside, it's I definitely feel blessed, and I'm delighted for us.
Yeah, and I guess supposedly, like if you've got a second wife, you're very open about it and say everyone's happy with that arrangement. Maybe there's less lying and infidelity because it's just very open. This is what's happening. Are you happy? Then enter this marriage, so which is interesting as well. So going back, your first daughter was called Yasmin, and you were a single father to Yasmin. How challenging was that?
And if you think about culturally, religiously, all of those things, Charlotte, have an influence to how you should live your life, and things like. So I was incredibly young when I had my daughter. I loved my daughter, loved having a daughter, and that relationship failed, and sadly that I don't believe it because of me, but equally I am always aware there's 2 sides to any relationship, and I would certainly be wrong to ever suggest I didn't contribute in some shape, fashion, or form to whatever that happened. But yeah, it was immensely challenging. I was young. I was sort of building up my career, but at the same time, I developed this relationship with my daughter that is incomparable. It's something that brought us together. I became both a mother and a father. For her, I didn't know what I was doing at all. Didn't have a clue. I was incredibly young.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
So I was 22 when I had my daughter. Well, no, I was saying incredibly young. I wasn't an English.
My parents were about that age when they had me. Yeah. Apparently it was the done thing back then.
Yeah. I mean, was Yasmin planned? I would hate to think that she wasn't. I would hate to go, I wasn't expecting you. I didn't want you when you're here now. Yeah, is the thing. But were we planning? Possibly, probably not. And was I unhappy with having Yasmin? Absolutely not. I was delighted. It provided a sense of purpose. It gave me reason to go to work and provide. But yeah, it was so hard. But Mum stepped in and stepped up and helped.
Recognise the value of family.
It made such a difference. And everybody else sort of chipped in as well with those relationships.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I take it you still get on brilliantly with Yasmin.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. She still gives me as much grief as she did 20 odd years ago. As in, and we have this interesting relationship. Is what we have.
Brilliant. Unfortunately, one of your children was born prematurely. I saw it in another kind of podcast that you did through lockdown, sharing some of your experiences about that. It sounded horrific. Can you tell me a bit more?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we got married in 2008, and I remember Mum going, right, you better have a child, things like that. And then I'm having to elaborate a little bit more, very personal. But and then my wife fell pregnant. We had miscarriage, and sadly we experienced 2 of those. And then we waited and waited and waited. Anyway, it felt a lot longer than the 3-4 years that it was. But then my wife fell pregnant, and wife's from Liverpool. We went down to Liverpool. Everything was fine. We kept an eye on the baby, and it was Christmas. And I remember going down to Liverpool, driving down the day before New Year, Christmas Eve, for a few days. My wife was heavily pregnant. First time she stopped as well from work, and we drove down. And I always had this ambition of calling. If it was a son, and we purposefully didn't identify what it was, but I always sort of said, if it's a son, I'm going to call him Jesus, right? And everyone thought I was taking the mickey, and thought I was having a laugh and that. And I sincerely wanted to call my son Jesus. Here comes the beautiful name, it's prophet, and I just felt as if, yeah, it would create someone in a particular light and through my eyes and whatever. Anyway, and I remember driving down to Liverpool and my wife saying, "Oh, I feel a bit funny-ish," and me going, "All right." And then we got there, went to sleep, woke up the next day. It's Christmas Eve, 2012. And my wife saying, "Oh, I really feel a little bit uncomfortable," and me chuckling like I normally do. I'll always make fun of any kind of situation type thing now. Is like to have a bit of a see the brighter side of things. I talk to the baby and I go, "Well, if you're coming, I'm going to call in Jesus." Things. Anyways, that's the background to it. And we then went to Cheshire Oaks shopping on Christmas Eve, which was just a real joke, but we bought lots of things, bought presents and things like that. Wife's family were looking forward to that evening. And I was driving back from Cheshire Oaks, and my wife says, "Oh, I feel a bit uncomfortable." I'm like, we need to ring someone. So we rang the hospital up here. They said, "Oh, pop in to the women's hospital." And we did, got there. And they said, "Oh, we just need to monitor the baby to track." And it literally went from, okay, everything's comfortable. Actually, the baby's heartbeat's a bit erratic, but we don't know that's normal because we haven't been monitoring you. Just to be on the safe side, we're going to keep you in overnight. We're horrified at this. Like, we're getting a bit anxious and really concerned. And my wife's on the phone to her mum, going, "Mum, don't worry too much, but I'm here." And they're like, "All right, they're just going to keep us in for a little bit." And then we went from sort of DEFCON sort of 1 to DEFCON 10 or whatever it was. People running in, wife being given steroids. "Oh, I think we're going to deliver the baby. We're really not comfortable with how the baby is." And it literally happened that quick. You feel as if everything's in a blur. It's a dream type thing. Being whisked. So my wife's whisked off to the operating theatre. I'm being sort of gloved and sort of covered up and whatever else. Going in there, and then she ended up having to have a T-section, and it was a boy. A son's born, and I'm like, "Oh, congratulations, you've got a boy!" And they whisked him away. And we're then in the operating theatre, wife's recovering in the recovery room, and like, "Oh, where's the baby? Where's the baby?" And this went on for 3 hours. And it got to the stage where I wasn't prepared to wait anymore. It was probably one of the most horrific experiences ever. And eventually they allowed me to go through. And this was the highest intensive care unit for babies. And it's interesting because it's 2 separate care plans. So my wife, naturally gynecology, obstetricians and whatever else, pediatricians for my son, And it was just interesting that they were each responsible for different care. Anyway, we went into this intensive care space and place, and I can still visualize it now. Charlotte going in there, and all I seen was the head about that big, and everything else is covered up. All right. We don't know, was the reply, because when we pulled him out, we don't know if we broke his neck, broke his arms, broke his back, don't know if he's going to survive, don't know whether he's going to be left with any injuries, it was all of this we don't know type of thing, and I was just like, gut-wrenching, horrific pain. Anyway, being the optimist that I am, here we find ourselves in the hospital on Christmas Eve, and everything else is irrelevant. So for the next, wife's in a room. Fortunately, she had her own room. I then slept on the floor for the next sort of 6-7 days, going between the two. So going through there, 2 of the other babies in that unit passed, and then several of the others. So he was due to be born at the end of February, was born actually on Christmas Eve. And his middle name is Jesus. It's translated to Isa, which is the Arabic pronunciation. And his first name is Yusuf. And that translates into Joseph, and wife being from Liverpool, obviously Uncle Joey and everybody else. So it's and then we were there. I didn't see daylight until New Year's Eve, which was when they let us out of that room. Then they put us into a parental space to support, and we just wanted to bring Yusuf back up here. So it took a bit of a while. He was in hospital for about a month and a bit. Came home with oxygen, but he's a strapping, thriving 11-year-old now. Oh, it was, yeah. It's one of those things that makes you think about life more broadly and what's important and what's not.
Did that experience change you?
I mean, did it change me? It probably reinforced those values of just trying to help others. And that there are so many things that are just out of your control.
Yeah, true. And I'm always a big believer in you just never know what someone else is going through. So the least you can do is be kind. Because when you have been through experiences like that yourself and someone's kind to you, it just means so much in that moment.
Oh, undoubtedly. And interestingly, I was just having this conversation yesterday. I found myself constantly throughout my life being in between that fight and flight because of all of the challenges and all of those experiences. So we talk about resilience, right? Resilience comes from experiencing something similar a number of times, and then you overcome that, and how do you develop that resilience? But when you experienced so many unknowns and so many others would describe as horrific experiences, it's slightly different to resilience. It's being comfortable with the being uncomfortable. And a lot of the experiences that we've had, I wouldn't wish them on anybody. Never mind anybody I dislike, and there's not very many people that I do dislike. But I then equally learn from them and reflect on them.
Yeah. It almost resets that thermostat in your brain. Right? I've been through this hardship, so it then raises the level of what you can tolerate. Yeah. And do you believe in the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There is that. Having said that, is that a good thing? It's debatable. As in, because you then scored from it, you then have that. As in, I'd love to erase certain things. I live on the principles you can always forgive, but you can't forget.
Yeah.
Because that happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it forever rewires your programming in your brain. And there's that question as well, is it better to feel pain or nothing at all? I think in that moment where you're experiencing pain, you'd always be like, nothing at all. And then once you've come through the pain on the other side, you're like, I'm better for going through that. Yeah. Well, final topic, we'll just ask a quick question on this bit before we go into the regular feature. You're doing a lot of business in Saudi Arabia at the minute. Now, that has a bit of a bad reputation culturally over here. Is that true?
That it has a bit of a bad reputation.
Yeah, I mean, you hear things of like beheadings and you hear things that they won't speak to women. Is that against our culture, our unconscious bias?
I believe so, without a doubt. It goes back to that comment that I made. First and foremost, who are we to decide what's right or wrong for others? Right? Now, that's not me advocating any extreme type of behaviour. But in essence, who are we to say our lives and our approach is the best and better than anybody else's, right? Other than we may be a bit more educated or a bit more experienced or a bit more liberal, whatever those descriptions are. But in essence, I went to Saudi. So my father was there for 20 years. I never visited. My mum went. Other members of my family were there. Some of them were educated there. And I, biasly, had a view of, all right, then Saudi, oh my gosh, it's this incredibly religious, orthodox space and place where, as you say, you have these perceptions. And having gone there a few times now, it's wrong. Those perceptions are wrong. Women are out, there doing whatever they want. Number of the people that I'd met from certain organizations were headed up by women, incredibly capable women. That transformation's happened over the last 3-4 years. So even people in Saudi are like, oh my gosh, can't believe what's happening here. In a positive way. So can I comment on what it was like 10 years ago? Absolutely not. But I can certainly comment about what's going on now. The biggest and the best projects in the world are happening in Saudi. The people there are keen to drive. I love the nationalism that exists. I love that. I've experienced it in Turkey. I've experienced it in Saudi. I'm saddened we don't have that here. I'm really saddened that we don't celebrate the state, right? So it was St. George's Day yesterday. Should we not all have had the flags out, everyone getting behind that, and it doesn't matter who you are or what you are. It's an absolute monarchy, which makes things a bit easier as well, right? Because everyone knows where they fit, where they sit, and whatever else. I would love for our monarchy to be recognised and respected for us to go, yeah, we've got this monarchy and it's the best thing ever. Of course, you could always question how relative it is and what's the necessity of it and all of that. But some of those things, for me, demonstrate why and how our views, our ways aren't necessarily always the best. I would love to see a bit more patriotism, a bit more nationalism, and I'm not talking about far right stuff. I'm not talking about and that's a minority. Yeah, that's a distinct minority. I know so many people, multicultural, multi-faith, that would love to stand out together, hand in hand, and go, this is the best place in the world. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to explore. We're coming back to Saudi. It's amazing. It genuinely is. And I cannot advocate or champion the opportunities there enough.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. And I think we're going to explore that in a little bit more detail later on. But thank you so much for all your honesty and all of your answers. We now have our regular 10 questions, which we whiz through. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you rate yourself, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, at a number of things. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, number 1, how good looking are you?
7.
Brilliant. How funny are you?
10.
How good at cooking are you?
8.
Doing well. How good at singing are you?
1, but I rate myself as a 10.
Oh, okay.
So I love singing. I think it's wonderful. Can I sing? Depends who you compare it to.
Do you have a karaoke song of choice?
No, I don't. I'm probably not that much of an expert. But
Do you drink alcohol?
no.
No, it was going to be a question how good you are at tolerating it, but I guess not at all if you don't.
Well, it's not to say that I haven't, but yeah, it's not something I tolerate.
Yeah, interesting. I don't tend to drink that much these days. I just find it affects my productivity.
And that's the thing.
Yeah, I need to be as efficient as I can in life at the minute.
I love that element of sort of waking up on a Monday or whatever else and Sunday with the kids and enjoying, time.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, it's time. It almost takes that away from you. What would be your parenting score?
Parenting?
Parenting score out of 1 to 10.
Oh, score? Gosh.
That isn't
yeah. If you're asking me, 8, 9?
Brilliant. How intelligent would you say you are?
Yeah, I'm quite intelligent. I'd once again go an 8 and a 9.
Brilliant. How kind are you?
I'd like to think 10. I would like to try and be a 10. In reality, I'm probably a 7 or an 8.
Brilliant. And the final question, Ammar, how good at sex are you?
Yeah, I'd like to think that I am very considerate. It depends what your definition of good sex is.
It's all about what you think it is and how you'd rate yourself.
Yeah, I'd equally go up there 9 is what I'd probably do. I can always get better.
Well, I think that we can in all aspects of life, can't we? Splendid. Thank you so much, Ammar. You've been wonderful.